Part 24. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 231. Lin An stretched out his hand, and an invisible force slowly enveloped Chen Daoming and helped him up. Get up. Lin An shook his head and said, there is no need to be so polite between you and me. The biggest problem we are facing now is the interference of external forces in our Zhu domain. Chen Daoming nodded and stood up slowly. He looked deeply at Lin An. Thank you, Lin An. Although my strength has recovered, I keep my word. I have stayed in this position for too long. It is time to step back. The identity of the supreme ruler of Zhu domain belongs to you. As soon as these words came out, the people of the Chen family around immediately raised their heads, their eyes showing shock. What? Their family leader wants to pass the position of the supreme ruler of Zhu domain to Lin An. This. Lin An raised his eyebrows and said, Chen Daoming, you. Chen Daoming waved his hand, turned to face the Chen family, and said firmly. This matter is decided. From now on, Lin An is the supreme ruler of our Zhu domain. The 3,521 major cities under the Zhu domain are all under the jurisdiction of Lin An alone. Tomorrow, I will announce to the world that I will officially abdicate. After the great changes in the Zhu domain, Lin An will be the second-generation supreme ruler of our Zhu domain. Everyone in the Chen family saw the determination in Chen Daoming's eyes. They were terrified and never thought that Chen Daoming would abdicate the throne at this time. But with Lin An's current extremely powerful strength and his relationship with the Chen family, it might not be a bad idea to pass the throne to him. Because there have been rumors before that Chen Daoming has been training Lin An as his successor. The next moment, all the people in the Chen family knelt on one knee in front of Lin An and said in unison. We greet Mr. Lin An and congratulate Mr. Lin An on taking over the position of the supreme ruler of Zhu domain. Congratulations to Mr. Lin An on taking over the position of the supreme ruler of Zhu domain. Congratulations to Mr. Lin An on taking over the position of the supreme ruler of Zhu domain. Kimeng walked gently to Lin An's side, held his hand, raised her head and looked at Lin An's profile with bright eyes. Although she was Chen Daoming's eldest daughter, she had never thought of inheriting her father's throne. Because she knew that although she had amazing talent, she did not have the ability to control the entire Zhu domain. And Lin An's ability to become the supreme ruler of Zhu domain was undoubtedly the biggest surprise for her. Letting her favorite man inherit the throne made her extremely happy. This was also the most recognized decision she made by her father. Lin An, she raised her head, blinked her eyes, and said, Congratulations. Lin An shook his head and said nothing. When Chen Daoming mentioned this matter before, it was beyond his expectation. Because he had no intention to take over the 9 provinces. But since Chen Daoming insisted on doing so, he could not say anything. He did what he wanted. In the 3,000 years dream, he had been in a high position for a long time. He did not need to worry about whether he could be competent for the position of the supreme ruler of the 9 provinces. At night, Lin An was lying on the bed. This was the first night after returning to civilized society in this period of time. Lin An was a little uncomfortable for a while and had difficulty falling asleep. And at this time, Lin An suddenly saw a figure in the dark approaching him on foot. Lin An closed his eyes and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Just when the figure was about to approach the bed, Lin An grabbed the man's wrist, accompanied by a low exclamation. Under the dim moonlight, Qi Meng's cheeks were slightly red. She looked at Lin An's purple eyes from a close distance, and her expression was particularly moving. Lin An raised her lips and said, What? Why are you here so late at night instead of taking a good rest? Qi Meng turned her head, revealing her fair and slender neck, and said with a blushing face. I can't sleep alone, I want someone to hold me. With a soft cry, Lin An blocked the moonlight with a quilt, and then Qi Meng's giggles and shouting were heard. Except for the ambiguous games that Chi Meng had played with Lin An more than 2 years ago, she had always been chaste and chaste for the past 2 years. Until she lost her virginity to Lin An a few days ago, she completed the transformation from a girl to a woman. Because she had been immersed in the essence of the tree of life, she had experienced a rebirth, and in the past 2 years, every time she broke through a realm, she would wash away the impurities in her body in the baptism of thunder. Her body became more and more perfect in these transformations again and again. In addition to her already beautiful and fascinating appearance and breathtaking eyes, there was no man in the world who could resist her. Especially with such a perfect woman, who took the initiative to come to the door to cater to him. For half a night. Until the early morning of the next day, the sky was just slightly bright. Kimeng leaned on Lin An's shoulder, grabbed the quilt, and blinked at Lin An's profile. If Banmen can only be regarded as an unripe apple, then Kimeng is already a ripe red apple, exuding a charming fragrance that makes people unable to stop. Lin An. Kimeng hugged his arm, raised her head and looked into his eyes, and said, "Can I ask you a question?" Lin An closed his eyes and said, "What question?" Kimeng was a little lost, and said, "You said that you experienced the history of the fairy age for 3,000 years, experienced the love between young men and women, and experienced the separation of life and death. I just want to know, in that big dream, did the woman you loved appear, and you two got married?" Although it was a dream, this question still made Kimeng very concerned. Lin An opened his eyes and looked at the delicate cheek leaning on his shoulder. She was really too beautiful, no matter from which angle you looked, there was no trace of flaws. Lin An took a deep breath and didn't intend to lie to her, saying, "Yes, 3,000 years, although it was just a big dream, but for me, it really happened. I had a wife and even children, but when the end of the world came, everything became a kind of illusion." He raised his head and said silently, "So, I cherish you more now, and I will not allow the ending of the dream to repeat again in reality." Kimeng stared at his eyes in a daze. At that moment, she saw vicissitudes in those eyes, no pain, no sorrow, only the traces of time left after countless things. Chi Meng knew that he must have been in great pain. But that pain had long since become illusory with the passage of time. "So, cherish what is in front of you." Lin An. Chi Meng slowly put her cheek against his chest and murmured, "I will always be with you. I know that you will definitely be able to surpass the era we live in the future, so I will also work hard to practice and keep up with your pace. Maybe in a few decades, hundreds of years, or even in the next 3,000 years, I will still have white hair and a beautiful face, and I will be able to accompany you like now. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yi Tiao Xianyue. Chapter 232. Lin An touched her long hair and felt a little warmth in her heart. He could clearly feel that Kimeng's heart was completely focused on him alone, and she was extremely determined. "It is truly a blessing to have a woman who loves me deeply in my life." But then, another girl appeared in Lin An's mind. A few months ago, the girl was nestled in his arms just like her, and her heartbroken eyes were still fresh in her memory. Why is it so difficult to find someone you can rely on? The sad voice of that girl seemed to ring in his ears again. Lin An couldn't help but feel confused. Half dream. When Lin An was absent-minded, Kimeng kept staring blankly into Lin An's eyes. She could see from Lin An's eyes that Lin An seemed to be thinking about another girl. Kimeng felt a slight pain in her heart. But then, the slight sting was replaced by a cool feeling. "Lin." Kimeng lowered her eyelashes slightly, gently held his wrist tightly, and said in a low voice, "Actually, it doesn't matter at all. I know that a strong man like you will be admired by many girls who are no worse than me. They may do as much for you as I do, and they may even give their lives for you." She looked up and smiled with tears in her eyes. "If you want to take over your whole heart like this, that's true selfishness. So, it doesn't matter at all. Lin, a strong man like you should have many beautiful girls around him. If not, that would be abnormal. Her voice was a bit coquettish, and the tears in her eyes flowed to the corners of her mouth little by little as she smiled. Lin An looked at her beautiful face, felt a pain in her heart, and hugged her tightly. A proud girl like Kimeng would never have said such a thing if her love for him hadn't reached the point where she couldn't help herself. Because everyone is selfish in their heart, especially after falling in love with someone, the possessiveness will become stronger and stronger. Men are the same, women are the same. Only when the feelings for that person are hopelessly strong will a person let go of this desire for exclusivity, give without asking for anything in return, and give wholeheartedly. Lin An felt that he would never be able to reach this state. As a result, he felt even more pity for Kimeng. This girl, after saying those words, had no reservations about him. Thank you. Lin An covered her red lips and said. Kimeng, you will always be my woman. This ambition remains unchanged. Noon the next day. All cities in the entire Jiuzhou region, whether it is the central square or the streets and alleys. All TV and internet channels are occupied by the same channels. The official channel from the divine capital of Kyushu region. This channel will only be used when the supreme ruler of the Kyushu region issues a nationwide order. Today, this channel was used again after the Kyushu territory entered a state of emergency a few months ago. Hundreds of millions of people in the entire Jiuzhou domain stood in front of the screen, looking at Chen Daoming on the TV in astonishment. No one knows what happened. No one knows what emergency happened. And under their gaze, Chen Daoming appeared in front of the camera. When the people of Jiuzhou territory saw Chen Daoming with white hair, they immediately caused an uproar. It's Chen Daoming. It's Mr. Chen Daoming. He is still alive. And judging from his appearance, there is no sign of any injury at all. In other words, those rumors on the internet are all false. They are all false. The entire Jiuzhou territory was boiling with excitement. Because of the rebellion in the past few days, people fell into a huge panic. They need a backbone, someone to take charge of the entire Jiuzhou domain, such as Chen Daoming, such as Lin En. So that means. A man said excitedly. Mr. Lin En returned yesterday, and together with Mr. Chen Daoming, we now have 2 world-class strongmen guarding our Jiuzhou territory. No. Not just 2 world-class strongmen. None of them ignored that Lin En was a strong man who had crushed 3 world-class players. With a strong man like Lin En and Chen Daoming, their strength in the Jiuzhou region has not weakened at all, and has even strengthened. After everyone was excited when Chen Daoming appeared, they all became quiet and looked at the screen feverishly. Mr. Chen Daoming has appeared, so he must have something big to announce. Are you going to counterattack the rebels? Or to welcome the return of Mr. Lin? Everyone is guessing. Opposite the camera, Chen Daoming, a man with white hair, sat on the main seat with documents in his hands. Then he raised his head, looked at the camera seriously, and said, I am Chen Daoming. This speech to the whole country is mainly to announce 2 things. The first thing, he said deeply, yesterday, Lin En has returned to our Jiuzhou domain, and thanks to Lin En's help, my body has now returned to normal and my strength has greatly increased. Therefore, I warn those foreign forces who dare to interfere in our Jiuzhou domain that you are now facing the Jiuzhou domain where Lin En and I exist. If you think you still have the ability to fight us now, then we will accompany you to the end. As soon as these words came out, the people of the entire Jiuzhou domain raised their fists and roared. This is their supreme ruler. For the first time in the past few months, he has officially challenged the international community. For these civilians, Jiuzhou domain is their home, and they will never allow outsiders to interfere in Jiuzhou domain. They also hate those rebels to the bone. Because when they invite external forces to interfere in such things, they have been labeled as traitors by people. Since ancient times. Those who dare to betray Zhou domain will never have a good end. The cheers and roars of the people slowly calmed down, and they looked at the screen again fanatically. Because Chen Daoming said that he had a second thing. Everyone was waiting for Chen Daoming. Just before the camera, Chen Daoming raised his head and said seriously, "The next thing I want to talk about is the second thing. I, Chen Daoming, have ruled Zhou for 50 years. According to the lifespan of a normal person, this is half of my life. Especially after experiencing the events of the past few months, I feel more and more tired. So I think that maybe changing someone to rule Zhou can give us a better future. So I declare," he raised his head and said firmly. "From today on, I will officially step down as the supreme ruler of Zhou. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 233. As soon as these words came out, everyone in Zhou fell silent. They stared at Chen Daoming on the screen in a daze, never expecting Chen Daoming to announce such a thing. Resigning as the supreme ruler of Zhou. In an instant, the entire Zhou region was in an uproar. The discussions that came one after another even ignited the entire network at that moment. Chen Daoming is going to resign as the supreme ruler of Zhou. No one dared to believe this. In the entire Zhou region, apart from Chen Daoming, who else has the ability to rule the entire Zhou region? Who else has that ability? And the next moment, Chen Daoming's steady voice came. "And I have already selected the most suitable candidate to be the supreme ruler of our Zhou region." Everyone held their breath and looked at the screen in astonishment. The next moment, Chen Daoming looked directly at the camera and said the name word by word. "Lin En. From now on, Lin En will be the second supreme ruler of my Zhou domain. The Supreme Council of Zhou domain, the Supreme Court of Zhou domain, the 3,500 major cities under Zhou domain, and the 72 major political families in Zhou domain have unanimously passed my highest resolution. From today on, the highest power in Zhou domain will only be held by one person, and only one person. He is Lin En," Chen Daoming said firmly. In an instant, the entire Zhou domain was detonated. No, even all the countries in the world that were paying attention to the latest situation in Zhou domain were all shocked after this news broke. Lin En. Lin En inherited the throne of Zhou. He is the god of killing who crushed the 3 world-class strongmen. Although there have been rumors that Lin En is the successor trained by Chen Daoming, I still didn't expect that Lin En would take over Chen Daoming's position so soon. But is this really prudent? He is a god of killing. Except for Zhou, all other countries felt panic and trembling after receiving this news. They are not afraid of Chen Daoming because they know Chen Daoming. Chen Daoming will never challenge the whole world publicly unless it is absolutely necessary. But Lin En is different. In the information they got, Lin En is a madman, a demon, a god of killing. An absolute war maniac. Letting such a person take charge of Zhou, does it mean? Does he want to go to war with the whole world? In the Eastern 8 Clans Alliance, Bailey Sen gritted his teeth and punched the table angrily. Judging from the way Lin En wiped out tens of thousands of people yesterday without any emotion, once he becomes the supreme ruler of Zhou, it will be a matter of life and death. Not only them. Other major countries in the world are trembling. They have not seen Lin En's cruelty with their own eyes, but they have heard about it through various channels. If Chen Dao is the kind of dove with fangs, then Lin En must be the kind of eagle with bayonets all over his body. Because of Chen Daoming's words, the supreme rulers of all major countries in the world immediately roared and gathered all the high-level officials. The change of the supreme ruler of Zhou will definitely change their foreign policy. Quick! Quick! Notify everyone and hold an emergency meeting immediately. Sound the first level alarm. That Lin En has become the supreme ruler of Zhuzhou. According to his usual style, he will definitely start a war. Quick! Quick! The whole world is panicking. Because they were really shocked by Lin En's massacre in Zhuzhou a few months ago. If Lin En was a little irrational, then this would definitely be a world war. And under the trembling gaze of countless people around the world, a young man appeared in the camera. When the young man appeared, the hearts of everyone in the world trembled slightly. Purple eyes, cold expression. That's right. It was Lin En. After disappearing for a few months, he appeared. He appeared again in the eyes of the whole world. On the main seat, Lin En looked at the camera and said lightly. What should be said, Chen Daoming has made it clear. From today, I am the supreme ruler of Zhuzhou territory, but all the residents of Zhuzhou territory, you don't need to worry. After I take office, Chen Daoming will still assist me in handling matters within Zhuzhou territory. Lin En looked deeply at the camera and said, he is responsible for managing the people's livelihood and development within Zhuzhou territory, so I can only deal with matters outside Zhuzhou territory. As soon as these words came out, the rulers of all countries in the world trembled in their hearts and turned pale. Especially after seeing those deep purple eyes, they actually felt their hearts tighten suddenly, as if they were all invited to death. Those eyes were really scary. Lin En looked deeply into the camera and said, so now, as the supreme ruler of Zhuzhou, I will talk to the whole world. The 8 clans alliance in the east is the rebels in my Zhuzhou. I know that many of your countries have intervened. I don't care whether you are supporting them openly or secretly. I will only give you 3 days. If you withdraw your aid to the rebels and leave my Zhuzhou within these 3 days, the past accounts can be written off and I will no longer care. Lin En's voice suddenly rose, and his eyes instantly became cold and fierce. But 3 days later, if I find that you are still supporting the 8 clans alliance, then unfortunately, after I wipe out those rebels, I will find you. I don't mind if there are fewer countries in this world, and I don't mind how many people you will die because of this. Because this is my ultimatum to you. The next moment, the screen went black. All the people in the entire Zhuzhou region were stunned. All the people in the world who were watching the live broadcast were stunned. The supreme rulers of all countries subconsciously slumped in their chairs, staring blankly at the black screen. He is threatening the whole world. That's right. He is threatening the whole world, he is giving the whole world an ultimatum. The next moment, the whole Zhuzhou region was boiling. People raised their fists and roared towards the sky. As expected, it is our Lord Lin. This is the domineering attitude that the supreme ruler of our Zhuzhou region should have. This is your ultimatum. Lord Lin is invincible in the world. Whoever dares to offend my Zhuzhou region will be punished no matter how far away they are. Whoever dares to rebel against my Zhuzhou region will be punished no matter how far away they are. People screamed, and their emotions were completely ignited by Lin at this moment. The fear and panic of the past few months have all disappeared completely because of Lin's words. Zhuzhou needs such a tough ruler. What Britain, what the land of the rising sun, go to hell. Zhuzhou is the strongest country in the world. If you dare to anger the lion, be prepared to be killed. A mere barbarian dares to shout in my Zhuzhou region. I'm tired of living. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 234. Compared with the excitement and high emotions of people in the Kyushu region, other countries outside the Kyushu region fell into an eerie silence. Especially those countries that are interfering in the internal affairs of the Kyushu region, their supreme rulers are even more pale. If the person who said this was any ruler, they would probably laugh at him and regard him as a clown. But, that person is Lin. The god of killing who crushed 3 world-class experts a few months ago and caused turmoil in the Kyushu territory. He really has the ability and strength to challenge all of them. And, With his character, he can really do it. Quick, the supreme ruler of a country suddenly lifted the table and roared loudly. Immediately send people to the Zhuzhu territory and bring back all the people we sent to help the 8 ethnic alliance. Immediately issue the highest statement to me. We have always loved peace. We have always maintained friendly relations with the Zhuzhu territory, and we will do so in the future. We will always maintain a friendly relationship. Quick. Act quickly, or it will be too late. Another country. Immediately cut off all contact with the alliance of 8 tribes and destroy all information on contact with them. Quick. Quick. What? We signed an aid treaty with them. Who signed it? Pull it out and chop it up for me. What, me? How could I do such a stupid thing? We have never signed any treaty with them. Another country. Quick. Quick. Issue a diplomatic statement immediately. We firmly safeguard the unity of the Kyushu region. We will always stand on the side of the Kyushu region and build a better new future together. We condemn all national forces that interfere in the internal affairs of the Kyushu region. We deeply abhor this. If the Zhuzhu territory is in need, we can provide assistance as soon as possible and help the Zhuzhu territory to jointly eliminate the rebels. What? The diplomats from the alliance of 8 tribes want to see me? Tie him up. Send him to the divine capital of the Kyushu territory. Just because of that televised speech, the whole world was in chaos at this moment. In the alliance of 8 tribes, Bailesin stood in the central square of the city, watching in panic as one after another strong men from foreign forces rushed towards the port carrying large and small bags. Bailesin almost cried. Everyone! Everyone! Listen to me. Then Lin is just scaring you. He doesn't dare to go to war with the whole world. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Once you leave, our alliance of 8 races will really be over. Don't move all the supplies. They just arrived in 2 hours. Gentlemen. Bailesin cried all over. The port of the 8 tribes alliance was even more lively to an unreasonable level. Transport ships flying the flags of various countries were densely packed almost all over the port. They had all received emergency orders and were here to pick up people. Quick! Quick! The people on the ship screamed in various incomprehensible languages at the soldiers running towards them one after another above the port. We have been given a death order from above. We must withdraw from Kyushu territory within an hour. Also, you must not leave anything from our country behind. Even if it's just a pair of shorts, you have to bring them back in a sling. Hurry! We don't have much time. The port of the alliance of 8 tribes was like a market. After picking up their own people, one ship after another quickly disappeared into the sea at an unimaginable speed. If someone who didn't know saw this scene, they might think they were trying to escape. Warships from various countries even quarreled over the location of the port. Some of the bad-tempered ones even fired a cannon directly at the other side. If it weren't for the fear of interference from the Kyushu territory, they might really have fought a real battle here. Just less than a day. The cities of the 8 nationalities alliance are already empty and sparsely populated. A breeze blew by, and apart from Bailesin who was slumped in the square in a daze, it was so lonely. At the same time, Jianghai City. Brother is really too domineering. At Lin An's residence, King Ian, who was wearing a white dress, jumped up quickly, with an extremely excited look on her face. If it weren't for knowing that she was a girl, King Ian would have really screamed. Ban Meng, who was sitting on the sofa and reading a book quietly, also raised his head, his eyes shining with moving light. They all heard Lin An's speech on TV just now. I also learned that Lin An has now become the supreme ruler of their Kyushu domain. King Ian quickly ran to Banmen, hugged her neck excitedly, and rubbed her little face against Banmen's face like a kitten. Banmen pushed King Ian helplessly and said, "King Ian, what are you doing?" King Ian looked happy, with little stars twinkling in her eyes, and said excitedly, "Banmen, aren't you excited? I'm so excited that I'm bursting with excitement, brother is really amazing." The corner of Ban Meng's mouth curled up in a beautiful arc, and he said softly, "I'm very happy too." In the past few months, Ban Meng and King Ian have become two very good friends. They were girls of the same age, and with Ban Meng's wisdom, the two of them quickly established a very deep friendship. There are so many twists and turns among young girls. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. "Excuse me, are the two ladies here?" "I'm Dei." King Ian jumped up immediately and said, "Yes, yes, yes. Come in." The door opened, Dei walked in, bowed to Banmen and King Ian, and said respectfully, "Dei greets Master Banmen, Miss King Ian." Since experiencing the great changes a few months ago, Dei has also slowly adjusted himself. Although it may take a long time to get over the bad news, at least now, he has temporarily set his own goal. That is to follow Master Lin En. And Banmen, as the daughter of Qing Xian, whom he once respected the most, he also has the same respect for her. "Dei, have you seen the news just now?" King Ian jumped up again excitedly and said excitedly, "Brother has become the supreme ruler of Jiuzhou territory. I have seen that only Lord Lin En has the strength and ability to take over the position of the supreme ruler of Jiuzhou territory." Dei was also excited, but he was a steady person. Although he was very excited, he still had a smile on his face and said, "Also, I have another good news to inform you." King Ian blinked and said, "What good news?" Dei smiled and said, "Just now, I received a message from Lord Lin En that he will return to Jianghai City soon, and he is on the way now. With Lord Lin En's speed, it will not take long for him to reach Jianghai." King Ian cheered and was about to jump up excitedly. She was like an elf, quickly circling the sofa, then hugged Banmen's neck and said, "Brother is coming back, I haven't seen him for a long time, woo. Banmen. 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 I'm so excited, what should I do?" Banmen's face was like ice melting and a smile appeared. She gently patted the excited King Ian and said softly, "Do you want to go out and take a look?" King Ian sat up excitedly, blinked her eyes, and said, "I'll get ready right away." After that, she rushed to the bedroom quickly. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xianyue. Chapter 235. Soon, King Ian, who had dressed up beautifully, quickly took Banmen's hand and rushed out of the house. After Banmen was not as calm as before, the two girls of similar age established a deep friendship in a very short time. And with Banmen's obviously more mature mind than King Ian accepted this little sister almost without any rejection. In King Ian's eyes, the only one who could match her brother was the most beautiful girl in the world. Banmen was obviously one of them. "King Ian, run slower," Banmen grabbed the cloak, and was held by King Ian's hand in a panic, running towards Jianghai City Square at lightning speed. King Ian turned her head, blinked her eyes, showing a row of white teeth, and said, "Of course I want to see my brother soon. Banmen, you must be impatient." The two girls who were as beautiful as elves were like a beautiful scenery on the street. After seeing them, almost all passers-by along the way couldn't help showing amazing expressions. Just like the purest angel in heaven, even the contact of their eyes felt like a blasphemy to them. Almost everyone in Jianghai City knew them. Everyone knew that King Ian was the sister of City Lord Lin En, and Banmen was the girlfriend of City Lord Lin En. Because of Lin En's rising reputation, the two of them were treated almost like princesses in Jianghai City. Soon, the two came to the largest central square in Jianghai City. King Ian turned 360 degrees, opened her arms, and said excitedly, "Let's wait for my brother to come back here. I must give him a big surprise." Banmen looked at her softly. In the past few months of getting along, she was sincerely pleased and yearning for the cheerfulness and optimism shown by this girl. At the same time, after learning about Lin An's experience in the past 2 years, she also admired the girl's persistence. Perhaps in Lin An's mind, King Ian's position will always be at the highest point and will not be shaken. Ban Meng looked up at the sky, and was a little absent-minded for a moment. Lin An, you haven't forgotten Ban Meng yet. But no one noticed that. In a tall building at the edge of the square, a pair of cold eyes kept watching Ban Meng and Qing Yin on the square. The man was wearing a black leather jacket and a mask on his face, and his eyes were as sinister as an eagle. He put down the telescope, turned his head and stared at that direction, saying, "The target has left their hiding place, and now is the best time to take action." In the room, 5 middle-aged men sitting cross-legged slowly opened their eyes. They were dressed the same as the man, and their eyes were equally cold and ruthless. Since Lin An killed 3 world-class masters, the pattern of the entire Jiuzhou region has undergone tremendous changes. Chen Daoming used a conciliatory policy to win over the forces of the other 3 families that were wiped out, and on the other hand, he killed all those stubborn resistance elements. Most of the forces in Jiuzhou have either joined the Chen family or moved to the 8 Clans Alliance in the east to continue to fight against the Chen family. The 6 of them are the remnants of the 3 major families who survived by chance. The masked man in the lead is named Ling Xiu, the 3rd son of Ling Changfeng. After the news came from the south, he immediately led his subordinates to leave the capital. And those people from the 3 major families who were still resisting in the capital were all wiped out. After that, he traveled around Jiuzhou, and finally after the establishment of the 8 Clans Alliance, he joined the 8 forces that were originally attached to their 3 major families. And his hatred for Lin An became deeper and deeper in this displacement. Lin An, he gritted his teeth, his eyes gradually bloodshot. You will not have a good end. Even if you become the supreme ruler of Jiuzhou, I have a way to make you pay the price of blood. Just a few days after he joined the 8 Clans Alliance, he led the 5 desperate men who were willing to follow him and lurked in Jianghai city. He had received news that Lin An's family and lover were hiding in the city. However, he had not had the opportunity to take action in the past half-month. Because Chen Daoming had obviously expected that there would be desperate people like them who wanted to attack Lin An's family. So Chen Daoming had already transferred heavy troops to Jianghai city, and even in just a dozen days, Chen Daoming built this place into a top-level city second only to the capital of God. But now, he can't wait any longer. We are ready and can act at any time. The 5 desperate men's eyes flashed, and they slowly pulled out the cold daggers. Ling Xiu stared at the 2 girls on the square and almost bit his lips. Kill them. I want to let that Lin An experience the pain of losing a loved one. The next moment, Ling Xiu suddenly stretched out his hand, with murderous intent in his eyes. The dagger covered with venom in his hand instantly floated in front of him, and suddenly, the dagger was accelerated to an extreme by him. The glass in front of the window was instantly broken, and at that moment, the dagger shot towards King Ian, who was smiling on the square. On the square, King Ian grabbed her 2 ponytails, looked at Banmen helplessly, and said, Banmen, why hasn't my brother come back yet? Banmen shook her head and said softly, I've been waiting for so long, and he's not here. And at this moment, Banmen's pupils suddenly contracted, as if she felt something. She turned her head suddenly and looked in the direction of the building. In that 1/10,000th of a second, Banmen's body flashed in front of King Ian like the wind. She suddenly stretched out her hand in that direction, and a light flashed in her eyes. Space. Crack. An explosion sounded that distorted space. The dagger that burst out instantly turned into countless fragments, and burst like bullets on the surrounding ground. This sudden scene instantly made King Ian's face pale, and she subconsciously tightened the collar on her chest and took a step back. The passers-by around the square were all frightened by the scene and panicked, and people fled in panic. In the rolling dust, Ban Meng's body slowly emerged, and the purple eyes stared at the huge building like a deep ice pond. King Ian, hide behind me, don't move. King Ian immediately grabbed Ban Meng's clothes in fear, and her face was bloodless because of fear. She was just an ordinary person, where had she seen such a scene? Ban Meng, what should we do? King Ian asked tremblingly. Ban Meng said softly, don't be afraid, I will protect you, and your brother will be back soon. If they attack us at this time, they are courting death. The next moment, Ban Meng suddenly raised his head, looked at the huge high-rise building, and said calmly, don't hide anymore, come out. In an instant, dense frost spread from the bottom of the building to the top like vines. In just a few seconds, the whole building was shrouded in ice. And in the next moment, the glass on the top of the high-rise building shattered instantly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 236. 6 figures jumped down from a height of more than 10 floors, surrounding Ban Meng and Qingyin in the center. As expected of Miss Ban Meng, Ling Xiu stared at Ban Meng fiercely and said, but it ends here. You will definitely die today. You will pay the price of blood for what Lin An did. Ban Meng said softly, you will regret it. She turned around suddenly, grabbed Qingyin's wrist, and said, let's go. The next moment, Ban Meng directly tore the space and was about to jump away from here. Ling Xiu suddenly showed a ferocious expression on his face, and said, I had expected you to do this. Do you really think you can escape from my palm? Ling Xiu suddenly raised his head, roared, and said, set up the formation. The 6 people suddenly put their hands together, and made more than a dozen hand seals in a row, and they were even chanting something. At that moment, scarlet illusory chains instantly burst out from their bodies and connected to the bodies of the 6 people. At that moment, the chains instantly broke through the space. Ban Meng, who was folding in the warped space, immediately felt the cold breath coming from behind. She turned back suddenly, and at that moment, the scarlet chains instantly wrapped around her body like snakes. Ban Meng, Qingyin screamed. In the next moment, Ban Meng and Qingyin were directly dragged out of the warped space by the chains and appeared in the previous position again. 6 scarlet chains locked Ban Meng's body from 6 directions. 6 pointed blood formation. Ban Meng raised her head suddenly, gritting her teeth. Ling Xiu looked at her fiercely and said, that's right, in order to be able to kill you, I spent a huge amount of money to find this forbidden formation from abroad. As long as you are controlled by these scarlet chains, your abilities will be locked in your body. Even if you have all kinds of means, you can't escape my imprisonment. Ban Meng said softly, do you really think you can kill us like this? The leader said fiercely, I know what you are waiting for. You are waiting for your father's magic gods to save you. But unfortunately, you don't have that chance, because you will die now. In an instant, he roared, and a bunch of poisonous daggers burst out from his sleeves. In that instant, those daggers were accelerated to the extreme. Even the surrounding space was faintly cracked. Ban Meng slowly raised her head, and just as the dagger was about to approach her, she suddenly smiled. She was as bright and beautiful as a flower bud blooming in winter. I'm not waiting for them. At the moment she said this, a sharp sword sound suddenly came from the sky. At the moment when the sword sounded, the ground of the entire Jianghai city rumbled and trembled because of the violent trembling of the space. In that 1/10 of a second, a pale sword shadow fell from the sky. Boom! A huge roar. Ling Xiu and the others suddenly felt unstable under their feet, retreated repeatedly, and their faces changed instantly. What is that? This sudden change made them tremble in their hearts. Although the power acted directly on them, the residual power alone made them feel unmatched. On the square, everyone looked over tremblingly. Dust billowed up into the sky with the explosion. And in the dust, a cold voice slowly came. It's really not peaceful. No matter where you are, you will always meet a clown like you. Instantly, the dust rolled away. Ling Xiu and the others' faces changed drastically. They immediately saw a tall figure appear in front of Ban Meng. He was wearing a black robe, his black hair was dancing wildly, and his purple eyes were like an abyss standing in front of them. Just standing there, the surrounding space was constantly fluctuating. Lin En. Ling Xiu looked at the man tremblingly and subconsciously took another step back. It was not that he wanted to retreat, but the breath emanating from Lin En was full of oppression like a star, and even their breathing became difficult. The next moment, Lin En raised his head and said word by word. You dare to attack my family, you really don't know what price you will pay. Ling Xiu said fiercely, you brought disaster to my Ling family. Even if I die today, I will drag you to be buried with me. The next moment, he looked up to the sky and roared, saying, set up the formation. Instantly, scarlet chains burst out from all directions, tightly wrapping Lin En's body in the center. Ling Xiu said fiercely, can't you control the law? Then let me see what you can use to control the law now. Lin En said, I don't need the law to deal with you. At that moment, the scarlet chains bound to Lin En burst instantly. Ling Xiu's face changed drastically, saying, how could it be? Lin En slowly raised his head, looked at him, and said calmly, such a clumsy trick, dare to use it on me, it seems that I really overestimated you. He just casually drew the white sword from his waist. At the moment the white sword was unsheathed, the sound of swords suddenly came from the surroundings. Even the people around him didn't even see what Lin En had done. The pale sword blade had already been sheathed. Ling Xiu and the other 5 stood stiffly on the spot. The moment Lin En pulled out the sword blade, cold sweat almost poured out from their bodies. But after a few seconds, he looked at his body stiffly, and saw that his body had not changed at all. Ling Xiu immediately sneered, Lin, it seems that you are just an embroidered pillow, just. Lin En slowly turned his head and said, you are already dead. Ling Xiu's expression changed drastically and he said, what? At that moment, Ling Xiu and the others were shocked to see sword marks one after another spread all over their bodies. They only moved slightly, and their entire bodies instantly turned into countless neat fragments. Their bodies had been neatly cut into countless pieces the moment Lin pulled out the sword. But because that sword is too fast. Even after they were cut off, their bodies continued to metabolize normally as before. It's like a building block built up. With a slight movement, the entire body collapsed instantly. Ling Xiu never understood until his death how huge the gap in strength between him and Lin En was. Everyone around looked at the scene in shock. It was clear that the 5 people just now were still intact, but in just that moment, they turned into countless pieces. Everyone's eyes fell on Lin En. Could it be said that this is the current power of their city lord? If a few months ago, their city lord could bear the name of powerful, then now, their city lord may really be able to bear the name of invincibility. No. Now he is no longer the city lord. He is the supreme ruler of the 9 provinces. Now, he is back. Elder brother. After Lin En easily crushed the 6 assassins, King Ian rushed over quickly and threw herself into Lin En's arms. I thought you would never come back, King Ian cried so hard that the pear blossoms rained down. Lin En immediately picked her up, stroked her hair, and said softly. How could it be? I'm back now, haven't I? I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xianyue. Chapter 237. Really? It has been several months since I left Jianghai City. King Ian has been by his side since 2 years ago until now, and they have never been separated for more than 12 hours. Being away for several months was indeed a kind of torture for King Ian. Lin En also felt very guilty. She had indeed been busy with her own affairs and neglected that there was a girl waiting for her in Jianghai City. King Ian lay on Lin En's shoulder and sobbed, holding Lin En's shoulder tightly with both hands, as if she was afraid that he would suddenly disappear. After Lin En calmed King Ian's emotions, he turned his head and looked at Ban Meng standing next to him. From just now, the girl stood there, raising her head and looking at Lin En's face. She did not lose control of her emotions like King Ian, and still had a calm expression on her face, but her purple eyes were equally gripping. Half a dream, Lin En reached out and touched her cheek, smiling. "I'm back." Ban Men bit her lip and turned her head to the side. She held her hand, her eyes flashing with water. She clearly wanted to fall into his arms as much as King Ian, but she still didn't want to appear so excited. "You lost your half-dream," she bit her lip and looked at the other side of her eyes with more and more tears. "I've been waiting for you in the wilderness for a long time, a very long time." Seeing the tears in her eyes, Lin's heart ached. That night, after he activated the Honkai Eye, his entire state was still affected by the murderous intention. Under the circumstances, he could no longer help himself. After being taken away by Kameng and waking up, it was already half a month later. But even at that time, he could still clearly feel the murderous aura in his heart, and the collapse of the Eye of Law almost made him feel discouraged. There were really too many things going on during that time. "I'm sorry." Lin En bent down, held her head, put his face against her forehead, and said, "I shouldn't have left you there, and I never will again. Forgive me, okay?" Soft words are like a special medicine. Ming has been very sad for the past few months, and has been wrapped in the feeling of abandonment. I obviously felt sad for a long time when I heard that there was some kind of unexplainable relationship between my sister and Lin En, but I just didn't know why. I just don't know why, but his gentle words made the sadness that had accumulated in my heart for so long disappear. Obviously so sad. Ban Meng bit her lip, forcing her tears not to flow out. Because she felt that was inferior. Especially for me, what kind of big scene has I never seen? It's just seeing this guy who makes me crazy in love again after a few months. Why are you crying? But. You've already said it, what else do I have to complain about? Ban Men turned his head and tried not to look into his eyes, saying. Anyway, I have already decided to follow you. Will I still have trouble with you? Lin En's heart felt painful again, and he quickly reached out and hugged her. If Ban Meng occupies a very important position in his heart, then in Ban Meng's heart, Lin is everything to her. She used everything she had to exchange for a small place in Lin En's heart. Her biggest wish was that Lin En would not forget her. This alone is really satisfying for her. Lin En patted her slender back and said softly, "Thank you, Ban Meng." Ban Meng didn't say anything. She just rested her face on Lin En's shoulder, but the hand holding Lin En was so hard that Lin En felt it was difficult to breathe, and her body was shaking all the time. Trembling. Beneath her calm appearance, the turbulent emotions in her heart made Lin extremely distressed. I really have ignored her for too long. This girl has been following him since the beginning. She and he have gone through many things, and they finally got together. In fact, the most important thing for him to do is to accompany her. Let's go back first." Lin En held two beautiful girls in his arms, with a gentle expression on his face, and turned towards home. And at this moment, the sound of breaking through the sky suddenly came from the distance one after another. Lin stopped, raised his head, and looked at the dozen figures approaching quickly. Kun Liang, commander of the 7th Legion of Chengdu, comes to see Mr. Lin En. Liang Qiushan, the head of the city's defense department in Jianghai City, has met Mr. Lin En. Yuan Xiu, the commander of Jianghai City's 1st Regiment, has met Mr. Lin En. After the dozen or so people landed from the sky, they immediately knelt down on one knee towards Lin En, sweating profusely. Some of them are high-level personnel who have served in Jianghai City a long time ago, and some are top-notch combat forces who have been transferred from the divine capital in recent months to strengthen Jianghai City's defense. They have also seen the news on TV before. Regarding the fact that Lin En has become the current supreme ruler of the Kyushu territory, they received the highest notification early this morning. The person standing in front of them now is the most powerful person in the Kyushu region. Lin En looked at them calmly and said, "You are late." As soon as these words came out, the dozen or so top officials of Jianghai City instantly showed panic and sweated profusely. After sensing the turmoil in the central square, they rushed here as soon as possible, but it was obvious that their ability to respond was still insufficient. Lin En said lightly, "I just came back to Jianghai City, and you prepared such a big gift for me. If I hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid my family would have been threatened with life at this moment. Is this your courtesy to welcome me?" Instantly, the faces of the dozen or so officials changed drastically, and they immediately kowtowed and said, "Mr. Lin En, it was my subordinates who failed to do their duty. The defense work of Jianghai City did not meet expectations, which caused Miss Banmen and Miss Kingian to fall into danger. We are willing to bear all responsibilities." They were very panicked. Because they really never thought that now that Mr. Lin En has become the supreme ruler of Jiuzhu domain, there are still lawless elements who dare to make trouble in Mr. Lin En's hometown. Lin En strode to the other side and said indifferently, "Mobilize the army, block the whole city, conduct a carpet search inside Jianghai City, and completely eradicate all the criminals who are still hiding in my Jianghai City and waiting for an opportunity to act." Lin En's voice did not have any emotional fluctuations. Because touching the lives of his family members has already touched his reverse scale. And he knew that after he became the supreme ruler of Jiuzhu territory, those forces full of malicious intent would inevitably send a large number of criminals to sneak into Jianghai City and attack his family. This is something he absolutely cannot allow to happen. "Yes. I will follow your orders," the dozen or so senior officials immediately saluted and shouted. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 238. Soon, the state machinery of Jianghai City began to move. Within just a dozen minutes after receiving Lin En's order, all the entrances and exits of Jianghai City had been blocked. The dense army quickly blocked the streets inside Jianghai City. In the past few months, the top combat forces above the Grand Master sent by Chen Daoming from the divine capital have been fully deployed. Under Lin En's strict orders, the army of Jianghai City did not dare to relax at all. Especially at this critical moment when Lin En had just become the supreme ruler of Jiuzhu domain. They had already left a bad impression on Lin En in their hearts. If there was no more action, they would wait to be judged. In just one afternoon, with the whole army dispatched, the army of Jianghai City conducted a large-scale investigation of the entire Jianghai City from house to house. Brother! Brother! In fact, we don't live in the previous community now. After leaving the square, King Ian turned her head happily, hugged Lin En's neck, and looked at Lin En with blinking eyes. Lin En smiled and said, "Oh? Really?" King Ian immediately jumped down from Lin En's arms, grabbed Ban Meng's hand, and trotted towards the road. "Ban Meng! Ban Meng! Let's go, let's take brother to see our big house." Ban Meng said in a panic, "King Ian, slow down." King Ian turned her head and showed a row of white teeth, waved to Lin En, and said excitedly, "Brother, catch up." Lin En looked at the two little angels and was surprised at the current relationship between King Ian and Ban Meng. Obviously, the two of them are now very good friends. A smile appeared at the corner of Lin En's mouth. Because this is the result he wants most. It is really easy for two little lolies of similar age to become friends, not to mention that one of them is a wise girl like Ban Meng. I'll be there right away. A few minutes later, Lin En held King Ian in one hand and Ban Meng in the other, and stood in front of a huge manor. Lin En smiled bitterly and said, "Is this where we live now?" Lin En knew at a glance that this manor was built by Wan Ko Baby and others during his absence in order to curry favor with him. Not to mention the attire inside, just from the outside, the area of this manor is very vast, covering an area of at least more than 200 acres. King Ian excitedly pulled Lin En's hand and dragged him inside. "Brother, I'll take you to visit." As soon as he stepped into the gate, dozens of female voices like orioles came to Lin En's ears. "Welcome, master." Lin En was startled, and saw dozens of slender, tall maids in maid outfits neatly lined up on both sides of the road. After seeing Lin En, they all bowed dozens of times in unison, and even saw the spring scenery inside from their low collars. Lin En's face suddenly darkened, and he asked, "What's going on?" Ban Meng turned his head away embarrassedly, and said, "Wan Ko Baby and his team specially selected professionally trained maids from all over the country to serve King Ian's daily life and your daily life. They will help take care of this manor when you are not around, and will also help take care of your life when you are here." Lin En's eyelids twitched, and his face darkened. He could see at a glance what Wan Ko Baby and his team were up to. "Let Wan Ko Baby roll over to me tomorrow," Lin En said with a dark face. Ban Meng raised his head faintly and said softly, "Lin En, you are actually very happy in your heart." Lin En asked in confusion, "Why am I happy?" Ban Meng raised the corner of his mouth and said softly, "Because in this way, there is no need to worry about excess energy. The manor is so big that even if you do something quietly behind closed doors, others can't hear it." The faces of dozens of maids standing there in a row instantly turned red to the roots of their necks, and they immediately lowered their heads. Only King Ian had a face full of innocence and confusion. Lin En's mouth twitched, looking at the naughty smile that gradually curved up at the corner of Ban Meng's mouth, knowing that Ban Meng was teasing him. It seemed that in the past few months when he was away, Ban Meng had slowly grown up. She became more like a normal girl, but this development was not good. Lin En immediately stretched out his hand, like picking up a cat, and picked up Ban Meng by the waist, saying, "You said that." Ban Meng's face suddenly became flustered, her eyes kept dodging, and her delicate little face slowly flushed with strands of blush. Her panicked look made Lin En want to kiss her. "Put me down." Ban Meng was a little panicked, shaking her legs very hard. She was very embarrassed to be held like a kitten in front of so many people. She wanted to struggle, but the result was obvious, it was useless. She was really too light, like a feather, almost weightless. Under everyone's gaze, Lin En smiled and strode towards the hall. The maids around him lowered their heads, blushing, and looked at Lin En's profile quietly. Just one look and their hearts beat faster. "Is this Lord Lin En?" Sure enough, as handsome as the legend says. It is said on the internet that Lord Lin En is a killer and a demon, but now it seems to be nonsense. Lord Lin En doesn't look like a cruel person at all, he is so gentle. Originally they were a little worried, but now it seems that Lord Lin En is definitely not the kind of person who is difficult to get along with. They looked at Ban Meng enviously, who was held by Lin En like a kitten, and thought how great it would be if they could replace Ban Meng with themselves. Because Lord Lin En is now the supreme ruler of Zhu. Miss Ban Meng is really so happy. Lin En walked and stopped, and he found that there seemed to be one less person around him. King Ian. Lin En turned his head in confusion and looked towards the door. But he saw King Ian holding the hem of her dress and looking at him with tears in her eyes. "Brother, why do you only hug Sister Ban Meng? Don't you want me anymore?" Lin En was embarrassed and walked back quickly, touched her hair and said, "Nonsense." King Ian opened her arms and turned her head and said aggrievedly, "I want to hug her too." Lin En had no choice but to say, okay. Okay. Lin En had to reach out and hug King Ian as well. King Ian immediately hugged Lin En's neck with a smile on her face. Lin En shook his head helplessly and sighed in his heart. Having two little lolies like this at home is really tiring. Looking at Lin En's back gradually going away, the maids immediately raised their heads, with little stars flashing in their eyes, looking at the direction where Lin En left with admiration and envy. Wow, so handsome. Just like the legend says, Lord Lin En is so handsome. No. We can no longer call him Lord Lin En. Mr. Lin En is the supreme ruler of our Jiuzhu territory. Wow. I also want to be held in Lord Lin En's arms and pampered. That feeling is so happy. You are dreaming. Miss King Ian is Lord Lin En's sister, and Miss Banmen is Mr. Chen Daoming's daughter. Are you half as pretty as them? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 239. Now that I have returned to Jianghai City. Lin En also decided to spend some time with his sister and Banmen. After all, I have been away for too long and have been busy with my own things. If I don't stay with them properly, I will feel uncomfortable. Lin En only gave the alliance of 8 tribes and other countries in the world 3 days. He will stay in Jianghai City for these 3 days. 3 days later, he will personally settle a previous debt and completely wipe out the alliance of 8 clans. Brother. What are you thinking about? The water in the cup is about to overflow. There was a sound of clear air coming from the kitchen. Lin suddenly came back to his senses and turned his head to look at King Ian in the kitchen, wearing a small apron and holding a spoon in his hand, showing his small tiger teeth, like a little tiger baring his teeth at him. A smile appeared on his face. It seemed that we were back to that time again. King Ian was busy in the kitchen, and he was sitting in a wheelchair, looking at her slim back. It's really very warm. King Ian, do you need my help? Lin stood up, hugging his shoulders and smiling. King Ian snorted and said, your cooking skills are terrible, I don't want your help, brother. Lin suddenly felt embarrassed. In fact, his cooking skills are quite good. After all, when he was alone in the past, he always had to solve the food problem by himself. But obviously, compared to King Ian, his cooking skills are still far behind. King Ian raised the corner of her mouth, held the spoon, winked at him, and said, brother, today I will cook your favorite dish, brother. You must be looking forward to it. Lin sat back on the sofa helplessly, drinking tea boredly. Ah, this damn leisurely wheelchair life. At this moment, Lin En's eyes suddenly lit up. I saw Banmen, dressed in a maid outfit and an apron tied around her waist, quietly walking in from the door with a basket of eggs in her hand. Half a dream. Where have you been? Lin asked doubtfully. And why are you wearing a maid outfit? Banmen grabbed an egg from the basket and said in a very calm tone that he forced to pretend. I'm better at making pastries. I borrowed my clothes because I only have formal clothes, which is inconvenient. What he said was still very concise as before. Lin En tasted Ban Meng's current outfit and couldn't help but admire it. The black and white skirt, under the skirt are 2 slender long legs tightly together, wearing white silk, and the upper body is in a delicate suspender belt, revealing the white slender shoulders. The long hair falls very neatly on the shoulders, the land is pleasing to the eye. Ban Meng's expression was very calm, but being watched like this, his face quickly turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. You'll be embarrassed if you look at me again, she said in a very calm tone. Lin En shook her head, looked at the eggs in her basket, and couldn't help but ask. You can also make pastries? Why didn't I know? Ban Meng focused on the egg floating on his palm and said calmly. I learned how to make pastries from Sister King Ian, and I mastered it in less than 2 days. And, it's very delicious. Lin An suddenly had an ominous premonition and said, "Can you help me?" "It doesn't matter." Banman said calmly, "No need, I'm very good at making pastries." Lin shook his head and watched Banman walk into the pastry room holding the basket like a cat. He picked up the tea he had just brewed, shook it, shook his head and said, "A boring and leisurely wheelchair life." He took a gentle sip of the tea, but didn't swallow it yet. Just heard a loud bang from the pastry room. Lin An spat out the tea in her mouth with a pop. "What's going on?" Lin An looked towards the pastry room in confusion and saw streams of black smoke spreading from the pastry room. A few seconds later, the blackened Ban Meng walked out. She closed the door of the pastry room lightly, then locked it and put the key in her pocket. She turned her head and looked at Lin En, and said calmly, "It's just a little accident, it's normal. I'll go change some clothes." Lin En stared speechlessly at the billowing black smoke spreading from the crack in the door of the pastry room, and then at Ban Meng who walked towards the door calmly, always feeling that things were not that simple. A few minutes later, Ban Meng grabbed a basket full of eggs and calmly opened the door to the pastry room. Boom! Not a few minutes later, another huge roar came. Lin En stood up in shock and said, "Ban Meng, what's going on?" Amid the billowing black smoke, Ban Meng walked out calmly, then locked the pastry room and said, "There was a small malfunction. It's normal. I'm going to change clothes." Lin. A few minutes later, Lin stared blankly at Ban Meng walking in from the door. Behind him were several brand new baking machines, ovens, and baskets of eggs, and he walked calmly into the pastry room. Lin murmured, "What is going on?" Boom! There was another loud bang. This time, Lin couldn't sit still and quickly opened the door of the pastry room and rushed in. He waved his hand, and the surrounding black smoke disappeared instantly. Half dream, Lin looked around. Then I saw Ban Meng squatting in the corner, coughing non-stop. Her clothes and delicate face were blackened by the smoke. When she coughed, tears fell out. It was obvious that she was choked. Lin An looked at the messy counter speechlessly. After the explosion, only the oven was left with fragments, and the mucus of eggs stuck to the wall. Lin An picked up a test tube on the counter that had not yet broken, shook the green liquid inside, and said, "Ban Meng, are you really not making biological weapons?" Ban Meng jumped up from the corner, frowned delicately, and said, "It's the problem of the oven and eggs. They want to explode." Lin An's mouth twitched and said, "Did you put the whole egg in the oven to heat it?" Ban Meng nodded and said, "Yes, I think it's quick." Lin An. Sure enough. Ban Meng is really not a material for this. Lin An tried to suppress the corners of his mouth that wanted to curl up, and said, "Eggs cannot be heated in the oven. Also, the noodles you made for me before, weren't they delicious?" Ban Meng nodded and said, "Because I only knew how to make noodles before, but now I can make pastries." She turned her head and carefully took out a plate from the counter, raised her head and looked at Lin An hopefully, saying, "This is what I just made, you try it?" Lin An looked at the pastry on the plate that was as black as chocolate, and his temples throbbed. However, looking at Ban Meng's hopeful eyes, Lin An still picked up a fork and forked a small piece, and forced a smile. "Is this made of chocolate?" Ban Meng shook his head and said, "There is no chocolate, only eggs." Lin An. So there is no chocolate. But this is like chocolate, no, it is even darker than chocolate. Can it really be made with only eggs? It really has a very ominous premonition. Lin An gritted his teeth and stared at the black chocolate cake. It was just a taste of Ban Meng's chocolate cake, but why did I feel a sense of crisis of death? This feeling seemed to be something I had never experienced even when facing those 3 world-class masters. No matter. Lin An closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and put the cake in his mouth. Chewed. Ban Meng opened his purple eyes. Although his expression was calm, his tone still revealed a hint of uneasiness and hope. Is it delicious? Lin An swallowed it hard, a smile appeared on his face, and was about to speak. There was a plop. Ban Meng immediately helped Lin An up from the ground in a panic, looked at the foam coming out of the corners of his mouth, and said, Lin An, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 240. A few minutes later, Lin An slowly woke up. Looking at Ban Meng's worried eyes, Lin An rubbed his temples and said, I'm fine, don't worry about me. Ban Meng lowered his head and looked at the chocolate cake in his hand and said, Lin, is my cake too delicious? Lin's mouth suddenly twitched, and he recalled the taste that could not be described in words. That wonderful taste is like a nuclear bomb exploding on your taste buds. That kind of complex taste, that kind of taste that makes people feel trembling in their hearts just by recalling it. Lin An patted her shoulder, shook her head and said, If you want to eat from now on, I'll just make it. Ban Meng frowned, looked at the chocolate cake on the plate, picked up a fork and gently picked up a piece, saying, Is it really delicious? It smells, actually. No, Lin stretched out his hand to stop him. But it was too late, Ban Meng had already put the cake in his hand into his mouth. For a moment, it seemed as if the world was silent. Ban Meng stood there blankly holding a fork, the wind outside the window blowing her long hair. Then Ban Meng fell straight back like a zombie. Lin's eyes suddenly widened and he quickly caught her body. No. Even a godlike physique like his own would fall into a coma after eating this kind of terrifying food. With Ban Meng's current body, after eating this, his life might really be in danger. A puff of black smoke came out of Ban Meng's mouth. Lin was anxious. He immediately opened the Eye of Law and immediately saw that the Tao injury he had cured before had a recurring condition. Lin An was startled and immediately stretched out his hand, a dazzling purple light flashed in his eyes. Wheel of Life. After hitting hundreds of wheels of life in a row, Ban Meng's physical condition finally improved. She slowly opened her purple eyes, her long eyelashes trembling slightly. Lin. She grabbed Lin's two fingers blankly and said, What happened to me just now? Lin quietly pocketed the remaining piece of chocolate cake. It was really necessary to go back and study this kind of killing weapon. Maybe I can use this killer weapon to develop a poisonous plague that kills even the world's strongest men. In a sense, Ban Meng is really a poison-making wizard. A few minutes later, Ban Meng held the hem of her skirt and stood there with her head lowered, tears falling from her purple eyes. She whispered, I thought it would be delicious, but it turned out not to be delicious at all. Lin An smiled and wiped away the tears on her face, and said, Maybe it is not suitable for cooking, but if it is defined as a biological and chemical weapon, it is definitely a top-notch work, so don't feel sad. Ban Meng raised his head, looked at Lin An with tears in his eyes, and said, Really? Lin An nodded and smiled, Really, you are very talented in this area. Ban Meng rubbed his red eyes and said, Thank you for comforting me, Lin. Lin An touched her head, stood up, and said with a smile, If you really want to learn how to make pastry, just come to me. Although I am not omnipotent, pastries are still within my grasp. Ban Meng raised his head, small stars lit up in his eyes, and said hopefully, Really? Lin nodded and said, Of course. A few minutes later, dazzling lights burst out from the pastry room. At the same time, Lin An's shouts came from inside. Wheel of decomposition. Levitating wheel. Wheel of life. If you look at it from the perspective of the Eye of Law, you can easily see that above the entire manor, there are lines of spreading laws everywhere. Even the sky is in the turmoil of the law, with turbulent winds and dark clouds. The troops who were conducting a city-wide investigation in Jianghai City all stopped what they were doing and looked at the sky with lightning and thunder in shock. Is it an enemy attack? Could it be that someone is attacking our Jianghai City? The soldiers in the city immediately took up arms on alert. They were about to take action when an officer who had been serving in Jianghai City raised his head, looked at the sky with reverence, and said with a smile, "No one attacked Jianghai City. This must be a vision caused by Mr. Lin An during his training." As soon as he said this, all the soldiers around him showed expressions of astonishment. Mr. Lin's training. The officer crossed his shoulders, looked at the sky with reverence, and said with a smile, "Yes, it is rumored that our Lord Lin An is the reincarnation of a god who can control the laws of all things. He is different from us. We use magic and martial arts, but Lord Lin An can directly control the laws. Every time he practices at this time, the laws of the entire world will resonate with it, which is extremely terrifying." The surrounding soldiers were shocked and said, "So terrifying. You are indeed worthy of Master Lin An, who can crush 3 world-class strong men." Almost at the same time, in the pastry room of the manor, Ban Meng hugged the plate and stared blankly at the ingredients one after another floating around him under Lin An's control. Lin An's eyes flashed with dazzling purple light, and his gaze was extremely focused. Cutting wheel, he suddenly looked at the orange floating on the left, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The orange was cut into neat slices in an instant. Lin An said calmly, "Use the power of the law to cut the orange into 0.01 millimeters wide and thick slices at the molecular level, with an error of no more than 1/10,000th of a nanometer, and the nutrients in each slice are equal." Ban Meng said blankly, "Great, so amazing." Lin An turned around suddenly, his eyes instantly fell on a suspended egg, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. Will of growth. In an instant, under the wrapping of the will of law, the egg instantly cracked, and under Ban Meng's blank gaze, a chick quickly hatched, and then grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Cluck, the hen just called out, and was quickly made into delicious meat floss by Lin An's dazzling means. Lin An said calmly, "Use the law to quickly grow from an embryo to a mature hen, then cut it at the molecular level, take out the chicken breast and make it into meat floss, and use the will of life to prevent cell aging throughout the process. This kind of meat floss retains the freshness of the chicken 100%. Ban Meng grabbed the little hand, and was stunned by Lin An's dazzling operation, saying, Too amazing." Lin An turned his head suddenly and said slowly, "Will of flame." Instantly, a raging flame burned in the furnace. Lin An said calmly, "Use the law to keep the temperature of the flame at a constant value, so that the pastry is evenly heated from all directions, and the deliciousness can be firmly locked in it. This requires the ultimate control of the heat." Ban Meng said blankly, I learned. The next moment, at the moment when the pastry was formed, Lin An turned his head suddenly, and a trace of hideous black instantly flowed out of his purple eyes. The darkness instantly filled Lin An's eyes, and the power of collapse poured out instantly. Eye of collapse. In an instant, under Ban Meng's blank gaze, the power of collapse instantly swept across the surface of the pastry. Lin An said lightly, "Finally, use the high temperature of the material level caused by the collapse of the law in an instant, so that the delicious taste of the pastry gradually dissipates with the smell, and firmly isolate it from the law level. At the same time, the surface of the pastry becomes crispy and brown under the influence of the high temperature of collapse, and this pastry dish is completed." Ban Meng was completely stunned, and his delicate face was frozen there like a portrait. Too amazing." Lin An smiled lightly, handed the plate to the blank Ban Meng, and said, "Don't you want to try one?" Ban Meng's eyes were full of stars, looking at the exquisite pastries on the plate with hope, took out a fork, gently forked one, and put it in his mouth. Chew. In an instant, Ban Meng opened his eyes wide.